Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. Lori Goldman on For the Sake of the Argument. Today's guest was Barb Byrum, running for Secretary of State, current Ingham County clerk. And she was pretty powerful and impactful, gave a lot of good information about why she feels that the very few people in comparison to all of Michigan voters who are going to next month's Michigan Democratic Convention should vote for her. I still think it's crazy that we vote for our Secretary of State, our Attorney General, the college boards. I can't remember what else this way. Seems crazy to me, but that's just me. Anyway, keep following For the Sake of the Argument. Tell your friends about me, about this podcast. You can catch it on all social media platforms. I appreciate you, and I hope you'll keep watching. Have a great day. Welcome, Barb Byrum, to For the Sake of the Argument. I'm really glad to have you today. You're running for Secretary of State, but let's tell our listeners what you are doing right now.
Yeah, well, right now, first, thank you so much for the opportunity. Right now, I am fortunate enough to be the Ingham County clerk. So I've been the county clerk for 13 years now. And prior to that, of course, I served in the legislature and I owned a small business. I've been traveling all around the state, campaigning for Secretary of State. And I've had thousands of conversations with people, and pretty exciting. We have less than 4 weeks until the convention, so it's crunch time.
All right, remind me, Ingham County, give me some cities I recognize from Ingham County.
Yeah, so Ingham County is the Michigan State University, so
Okay.
East Lansing. When people think of Ingham County, they think of the larger cities, but I live in the rural conservative portion of Ingham County. So way back when I ran for the House, I represented the conservative House district for Ingham County. At the time, this was before citizens redistricting. At the time, my House district was 50-50 Dem base, and it was a real battle to get elected as a Democrat in that area. But I was elected all 3 times and served out my terms.
Okay, that's impressive. So why are you running for Secretary of State?
Well, I've wanted to run for Secretary of State for over 8 years. I live election administration. It is a passion of mine. 8 years ago, someone else, Secretary Benson, had it locked up, and I didn't, think it was wise to challenge. But elections are important. Access to the ballot box is important, and it is a passion that I've had from way before I was even a county clerk, before I was a state rep. My mom took me to the ballot box, and I went and voted with her. And as a state rep, I was the ranking Dem on redistricting in elections way back in the day when the legislature chose their voters and drew their districts. And I saw the disgusting gerrymandering and dividing communities of interest that the Republicans were doing, which is why I signed and supported the Citizens Redistricting Initiative. Elections have been a passion, and that's why I'm running for Secretary of State. This is a passion I have had for over a decade.
Okay. How would you deal with the inevitable fuckery of the Trump administration in their attempts to violate our Michigan elections?
Yeah, well, Trump, this is nothing new from Trump and his ilk, quite frankly. Back in 2020, he was claiming the election was rigged before even a single vote was cast. And what I did is I went to social media. Before Twitter was the hellscape that it is today, I used that platform to educate people on Michigan elections and push back against the election myths and disinformation. And after the 2020 election, when he claimed the election was rigged, I was very vocal in the press, legacy media as well, and I testified in front of the joint House and Senate committee that was investigating the 2020 election. I testified that Michigan elections are safe, secure, and accurate. That's true in Ingham County, that's true in Kent County, Muskegon County, Lake County, Leelanau County, and Wayne County. Our elections are safe, secure, and accurate because Michigan clerks, whether they are local clerks or county clerks, Democrats or Republicans, most of them are actually Republicans, we follow the Constitution, the statute, and the rules and procedures set before us, and our elections are accurate. And after that committee, I spoke to the Board of Canvassers, the Michigan Board of Canvassers, and encouraged them to fulfill their oath of office and certify the election because our election was accurate in 2020. And don't forget, in Michigan, when people think that the election was not accurate, they have an opportunity to file for a recount. It's done by hand by humans. President Trump did not in 2020.
Oh, I wonder why.
I wonder why. And a lot of his supporters who were elected on the same ballot in the same election, they didn't have a problem with they themselves taking their oath of office.
Right.
But yes,
I know,
hypocrisy.
it's pretty crazy. So what kind of meddling should we expect in the midterms in 2026? Not just from the Trump administration, but from the Republican Party here in Michigan. What are you anticipating?
Yeah, so there has been meddling all my 13 years. We would do emergency preparedness for floods, for power outages. That's Mother Nature. But then we started having to prepare for AI and denial of service and other meddling. We even have radios now with the emergency management radio in case phone communication goes down. Now we're preparing for ICE at the polls, more disinformation, executing warrants to obtain ballots or documents. We're preparing for all of that right now. I took a call a few weeks ago from the governor's office trying to prepare for some of that. And they're not calling my opponents. They're calling me because I have the election administration experience of over 13 years. And I know election administration backwards and forwards. And we are preparing by empowering our local clerks. And when I train and certify precinct workers, those election workers, I'm looking for troublemakers. And if they're causing trouble or being disruptive at a training that I'm doing, then they are absolutely going to be disruptive and not follow their oath of office during election day or early vote. So they end up not getting certified. They need to take their oath of office seriously and their obligation to serve their neighbors and perform their duties as precinct workers for our communities.
Wow, my stomach flipped when you mentioned about ICE being at the polls. If that does happen, I think it's more important than ever that we have, people there to encourage people to kind of like we do at the abortion clinics for people to be able to walk in, make their vote, and not be manhandled by the ICE agents.
Yeah, we need to look at some preemptive measures as well, and I am working on that. Maybe an injunction or something like that, expecting, because, Donald Trump, he often talks about what he is going to do, and we need to believe him, and we need to be prepared, and I am in the process of preparing myself.
The SAVE Act, it's currently being debated in Congress, and it might pass into law before the midterms this year. Which is going to make voting so much more difficult for women. Can you tell us a little bit about the SAVE Act and what's your take on this bill?
Yeah. So last January, President Trump signed an executive order, the SAVE Act. And as an election administrator, I know that it'll do absolutely nothing to secure our elections, but do everything to disenfranchise voters. I rallied election administrators from around the United States to sign on to a brief with me in opposition. Last month, we found out that the federal district court ruled that the President of the United States does not have the authority under the U.S. Constitution to dictate how U.S. federal elections are ran. So now we see the SAVE Act, being moved through Congress. The SAVE Act is not going to make our elections any more safe and secure. It will absolutely disenfranchise voters because the identification to prove that you are and a U.S. citizen is easier, arguably, for men if they are able to get their birth certificate. And the SAVE Act, as proposed, doesn't even allow for a marriage license to prove that chain of name change. So we assume that that is going to be the case. But an amendment was offered, and it was voted down by the Republicans. So we assume that a married woman, over 85% of married women have a different name than what is found on their birth certificate.
Right. I do.
Yeah. And so we assume that a certified copy of their birth certificate, a certified copy of their marriage license, maybe a certified copy of a judgment of divorce, and a certified copy of a marriage license, if they've gone through that, would be sufficient. But the legislation doesn't say that it would be sufficient. There's a lot of misinformation about the SAVE Act. It's being sold to us as a photo ID requirement. This is not a photo ID requirement.
No.
And real ID is not sufficient because under the SAVE Act, place of birth is required for that identification.
And they want an original
and a
birth
certified
certificate.
copy, which is going to cost about $30. And if you have the option to go to your county clerk to get that,
if you can get there,
you're going to take time off of work. You're going to pay money to get it. And if you were born in a different county, different state, it's going to take a while. If you'll recall, this information was needed for real ID. And remember how the feds kept pushing implementation of real ID back because it is hard to get that documentation. It is going to disproportionately impact women, people of color, and rural voters.
Switching tracks a little bit, your critics say the lawsuit involving Mason school officials and allegations that you used your influence on behalf of your son could become a liability in a general election. How do you respond to that? And if you want to fill us in about that a little bit.
Yeah, I absolutely did not use any undue influence for my son to get back into school, period. The claim was baseless, and 2 courts threw it out, actually. 2 courts dismissed the case because I did absolutely nothing wrong. My husband did absolutely nothing wrong. My son, when he was 13 years old, was expelled from school. Under Michigan statute, he reapplied after 120 school days, and he was readmitted back in by the school board. I didn't have conversations to get him back in. I did not act inappropriately or unethically in any respect. He was admitted back into school, and he has been online. This happened over 5 years ago, and the courts have thrown out these claims because they were baseless.
Got it. If elected, what would you do to build upon the improvements to the Secretary of State's office made under our current Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson?
So I think Secretary Benson has made amazing improvements when it comes to customer service, and I'd like to expand on that. You know, I come from a rural area, so I know that not all areas have a Myers or a Kroger nearby to go to the kiosk. We need to look at more partnerships for kiosks.
I didn't even know there were kiosks
There are
in Myers
kiosks,
and Kroger's.
yes, and many, and you can renew your tabs there.
Oh,
among
my
other
God.
things. Yeah.
Mine are expired right now. I better go do that.
Yeah, yes, please. And we need to utilize mobile offices more and go to where people are as opposed to forcing them to come to us. Let's utilize the mobile offices more. And the campaign finance disclosure system needs focus, significantly more focus. It's not user-friendly, whether you are a candidate that needs to report or you are trying to find out where money is going and coming from because of you just want transparency. And we need to focus on transparency and accessibility when we're looking at that campaign finance system, known as Mitten.
I was just at a luncheon over the weekend, and one of the women I was seated next to was mentioning a complaint that she has. On the website, she has a son who's starting to drive. The son is wheelchair bound. There's nowhere on the website where you should be able to find it for instructions on how to acquire a driver's license for her son. And she's very frustrated by it and said she's mentioned it many times. So I think there are many things. It's impossible, I guess, to cover everything that comes up in people's lives. But if you are elected, if you'd remember that that's something missing, I'd appreciate it.
It is absolutely something missing. I heard a similar story from a woman in Midland County, actually. Her child also has some special needs and is trying to, get licensed and go through driver's ed. I believe it was under Engler. He privatized driver's education.
Wow.
So I took my driver's ed from, I think he was the football coach during the summer. And driver's education is no longer accessible to many.
It is so unaffordable.
It is so expensive. And it is extraordinarily time consuming when it's not offered, in a class or during the summer. And I understand that schools may not like that liability, having the car and all of that, but we have got to do something because we are not serving the people of Michigan. Since we have privatized it, it's not as accessible. And this becomes a workforce issue, right? People they don't have their driver's license. So it's a workforce issue. But it's also, this is Michigan. We build cars. we need to make sure that we are affording our students an opportunity to obtain a driver's license.
You can't get around without one in Michigan.
No, you really can't.
That bus route sucks.
It does.
I know they're trying to make it better, but everybody is against mass transportation. You should be able to go to every college. You should be able to go everywhere in Michigan, but you can't. So this race, you have some heavy competition, most prominently Lieutenant Governor Garlin Gilchrist, who I have to say, I love Garlin Gilchrist, supported him in the governor's race, jumped out of that to come in. And I was supporting a go-go, and I'm sorry that he got knocked out. And also Susanna Skrelly, who is a former Michigan Lottery Commissioner. What makes you the best option? And then I want your take also on the weird way, and I think a bad way, that we nominate people to be in your category: governor, secretary of state, attorney general, not governor, attorney general, secretary of state, and the college boards. If you don't go to the convention next month, you don't get to vote on who shows up on the ballot. So tell us what makes you the best choice for secretary of state, and what do you think about how we do it at the convention?
Yeah, so I'm the best choice for Secretary of State because, one, I'm qualified. I've conducted 42 elections in my capacity as county clerk. I've been county clerk for 13 years. I've conducted numerous recounts. I know election administration backwards and forwards. I'm also the only candidate who's ever been successfully elected. I've been elected to county clerk, a Democratic county. I've been elected as state representative to a 50-50 Dem base district. So I've successfully been elected. I know election administration. I understand customer service. I was raised in a hardware store, and then I went on to own a different hardware store for 20 years. I understand listening to the customer and delivering and showing results. So I've been very fortunate. Excuse me. I've been very fortunate in that I have been endorsed by dozens of unions, dozens of county and local clerks, legislators, current and former. I am the only candidate that knows election administration backwards and forwards. And in a time when Donald Trump is a clear and direct threat against our democracy, I am the only one that is ready on day one to push back and fight like hell to maintain access to the ballot box. And I don't just talk about taking on Donald Trump like my opponents. I've actually done it, and I've been successful. When it comes to the convention, it's in Michigan's Constitution that the parties nominate their candidates for Attorney General, Secretary of State, and the education boards. It's going to need a constitutional change. It is unacceptable that a handful of people, probably about 5,000 people, will decide who the Democratic nominee is going to be for Secretary of State and Attorney General. But that's the way it's set up in the Constitution right now. I look forward to working with grassroots supporters to circulate petitions to change the Constitution.
Does that Constitution emanate from Michigan power, or does it come from national?
It's Michigan. It's Michigan. And grassroots, we have changed Michigan's Constitution quite a bit. When the legislature refused to increase access to the ballot box, if you'll recall, we've been wanting no reason absentee voting for 2 decades at least. We've been wanting postage prepaid. We've wanted drop boxes. We've wanted early voting. We have wanted all of those things, but the legislature refused to deliver. The Secretary of State can't deliver on that. We took matters into our own hands. We circulated petitions. We got those questions on the ballot, and we passed them overwhelmingly. And I've been very fortunate as county clerk to implement all of those sweeping changes to election administration over my 13 years. And quite frankly, when Donald Trump started talking about eliminating mail-in voting, I was prepared to rally election administrators again to push back and file a brief against him because, quite frankly, those protections are in Michigan's Constitution, and I'll be damned if I let Donald Trump dictate what our voters can and cannot do to exercise their legal right to vote.
Right. In this election, going forward, the Secretary of State is, I think, more important than any other office to protect our voting rights. Over a decade ago, you were involved in a controversy known as Vagina Gate. Can you tell my viewers what happened?
Yeah. So an omnibus abortion ban was making its way through the legislature. I was in my last term in the House of Representatives, and I offered an amendment to regulate vasectomies because it was only fair. A colleague of mine said vagina on final passage, and the Republicans passed the legislation. I figured, okay, well, let's wake up tomorrow, fight another day. And tomorrow came, and I rose my hand actually to introduce some guests that were in the balcony for Juneteenth. Very customary to recognize your guests. And they wouldn't turn my microphone on. I thought, well, that's weird. So I went to a different microphone, and they wouldn't turn that microphone on.
Wow.
And I thought, well, they must be trying to figure out how to sock it to the working people. This was under Rick Snyder. So I gave him a couple minutes, and then the Republican floor leader came to me and told me, Barb, you won't be speaking today. And I thought, well, that's the first time in my life that anyone thought it was a good idea to tell me to sit down and shut up. But there we were. And I fired off a tweet real quick because I was just pissed. It became a national story within 24 hours. People wanted to send me money. It wasn't about me. I opened up a PAC, a political action committee, called More Women in Government because, quite frankly, that's what we need. And I said, just send money to this PAC. And I used those dollars to support pro-choice Democratic women that ran for school board, city council, state rep, and Senate. Mm-hmm. A week after I was silenced on the House floor, I performed vagina monologues on the Capitol steps. At the time, I didn't know what vagina monologues was, but so it lives on the internet forever. And there were now Governor Whitmer, now Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, county clerk. We all served together in the legislature, and so we all were performing vagina monologues on the Capitol steps.
See, if they'd only left your microphone on, it would have been something that came and went.
Yeah.
But now it's legacy. Mm-hmm. Do you have a political figure, alive or not, that you look up to?
Debbie Stabenow.
Okay.
100% Debbie Stabenow. She has represented our district very well. I was fortunate. She was a county commissioner in my county growing up, as was my mom. And she has been that light. I've been so fortunate. My mom, my grandmas, both my grandmothers were strong women. My grandmother on my mom's side just passed away, but I was raised by very strong women who don't back down from a fight. They aren't afraid to take punches. They aren't afraid to throw some punches and land them as well. That's the stock I come from, and I'm very fortunate that I was raised in that environment.
I grew up in Ecorse, and John Dingle Park is up at the Detroit River. Mm-hmm. And so John Dingle was always a part of my childhood. Mm-hmm. And I remember when he married Debbie, and, I was probably a teenager then, and maybe I was older, but we thought, wow, look at, she's so young and he's older. But, she fit right in, and she went on to carry his legacy. Mm-hmm. To great end, and I think we all owe her a debt of gratitude. So I'm a fan as well. What's your advice for young people who might want to be involved in elections and political engagement, but also might be disillusioned by politics broadly and all the harm that comes with it?
Don't wait. Get in. Get in. Reach out to me if you want to run for office. I know filing for office and campaign finance backwards and forwards. I would love to be a resource, but get in. We need you. You are our future. And politics is a full contact sport. It was less full contact back when I first started running for state rep, but it is a full contact sport. And you have to have thick skin. But you can do it. And our nation depends on young people to stand up for what they believe. Educate the olders, the more seasoned elected officials. Educate them, hold them to account, but get involved. We need you. Please don't wait. And if I can ever be of assistance, give me a shout. I'm definitely game.
Barb Byrum, thanks for being on For the Sake of the Argument today. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.